Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our usual Monday Mish-Mashing Battle Lounge. Today we are on the subject of attack and defense. I have Rillian here, as always, and on my side at least, I am going to be playing some Sakura.
Did you happen to see what bars that Ken player is to you?
I did not, but I don't remember it being bad.
Alright then.
So hopefully it's alright.
I believe that the internet infrastructure makes it a little bit difficult for me to get good connections to some of the Dominican Republic players. So I'm only seeing a 2-bar. But if yours looks fine, then I suppose there's nothing really to worry about.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, I can only actually check this once I've actually popped out of the fight, so we're going to have to wait and see on that regard. But it should be alright, one would hope.
While I was watching, as always, when I'm training with the rest of the team, I'm usually training to be as lazy as possible and block them out with normals and just not actually put up much offense. It's maybe a little harder on Sakura since I'm not as certain of her ways of getting in, but the idea is to be as calm as possible at all times. The team in turn has to eventually learn what happens if they just defend against me and expect me to take all the damage that way.
Like that.
As a result, you're often likely to see me use a lot of meter to get kills or similar because until it's sort of the marker for the others. If I'm using a lot of meter, they're probably doing better.
As for me, managing to actually get in on you properly is not the easiest thing in the world.
My advantage in these matches is that I have a very good idea, relatively, of the rhythm of attack and defense mindsets of other players. Over time of playing fighting games, which I've been doing for a long time, even if you don't specifically get good at execution or get particularly good at big damage, figuring out which move to use, you eventually build up an idea of when people want to take their actions, and if you understand their character enough, you know which actions they want to take.
Aha!
For me, generally, whether or not I lose a round against most players at the level that I gather information from has to do with whether or not I continue to attack while they are in their defensive mode. Since Chun-Li is relatively easy to punish, and doesn't have a lot of safe moves to put direct pressure on other players, you can't go attacking in those situations.
I have no idea if my CA would beat yours or not.
It would not have.
Alright.
Since your CA is a projectile, and the projectile invincibility on Chun-Li's
Oh,
ends relatively late, so
I see.
I'm pretty sure that it does not have any hitboxes other than projectile hitboxes, even though it does convert into one. You seem to be quite full now.
Indeed, it's quite a busy day. And our Ken down there is a 3-bar apparently. 4 bars to everyone else and 3 to you.
I see, but I'm not sure it was the same Ken. I didn't even check.
I
Either way.
looked German, I think, was the flag. Assuming I remember
So,
Germany's flag.
Zeku is a character who does this to Chun-Li a lot because he actually can hold her out. And getting... When I say hold her out, I don't just mean in the sense of, oh, I get punished for going in. I mean that Zeku can chip away at her from far enough away that she has to go in, eventually. Which is a problem that most zoners give her, but I could probably see if I could wait, see if I could get the opponent to switch to young Zeku, maybe get something off that. But overall, you should expect that this is going to be relatively slow because the way that I deal with Zeku is based on BirdieBot, which is about getting life leads and hitting with long normals. So today I'm being super patient again. And mostly this is going to come down to how well I can anti-air. Oh, that reaches far. So the proper adaptation for my opponent should be to try to chip damage me into some position and be very low on their own so that this situation improves for them over time. There we go. For example, they have invincible moves and have been able to use those to get some more space. But I went for offense, causing myself problems again. And once again, went for offense, at a time when my opponent's mindset was toward hitting buttons to keep me from coming closer. So let's slow down again, even more. Now, there's a moment here where I probably get to use wake up pressure. But that was not it. It's probably a little bit later on. Here, for example. Because my opponent's mindset as to what they can and cannot do is different. Endeavoring to change that mindset, endeavoring to keep yourself from thinking primarily about what move you want to do as a thing by itself, and at least incorporating the standard thought about what your opponent's mindset is into your options and choices will help a lot in these situations. For example, my thought here is that my opponent is going to attack because of that, but I couldn't counter it. But that's not really a matter of my understanding of my character, that's a matter of my understanding of theirs. If you understand your opponent's rhythm, deconstructing their actions is easier at the lower levels of play because the way that they move is dependent on where you put them on the screen, because less people are likely to play footsies properly at those points of the game. It's vital for Chun-Li players to know how to and when to do that, because you must choose very carefully when to use your EX spinning bird kick. Ooh.
He was just going to keep coming after that critical art.
Yes, because the feeling of the opponent riffing the critical art is that they felt the reason that they should do the critical art was because they were going to manage to land it. If I get out of the way, their feeling is, I'm still in a scramble. My opponent's probably not ready to defend yet. They're probably thinking they got out of that somewhat by luck or whatever. So the shift is not going to happen just because of that.
I see. For me, whenever my critical art gets blocked, certainly, I'm suddenly, I need to defend. But I suppose I have no idea what actually happens in the case of a whiff.
Because you play Karina, your critical art doesn't whiff so much as it will get blocked.
Yeah.
No, actually that's not true. I've seen you do it. If you go under someone with your critical art, you tend to attack them afterwards.
I do. Alright then. I suppose I could see that, yes.
So here from the Ryu perspective, it's technically even harder than Zeku, because Chun-Li can't jump over Ryu's fireballs on reaction as easily as most characters can, because her jump is too floaty. Therefore, it's actually to your benefit to stay as far away from Ryu as you can, so that you can throw out your own fireball and get somewhere with it. Okay. Also, I have to change my fighting style because the lag is very, very slightly problematic. Not in the sense that I should be losing or I'm complaining that the lag is causing me to lose. The problem is that because the lag hides the opponent's motion for a little bit, I have to rely more on understanding them as a person. So it's going to take me a little bit longer to get that information about their flow. But I can basically say so far that this opponent is ready at all times and constantly attacks, whereas I can't visibly see that very easily with the lag as it is. So the flow at the moment is toward, okay, Ryu has a bunch of moves he can use in these situations, and I should be countering them with something different than I've been using. But because I'm thinking to myself, okay, Ryu is normally defensive, and the moves the player is using currently are not the strongest for offense that is possible. So when I'm thinking about, is there an attack coming, I'm not thinking about the attack that comes, first of all. and I'm not thinking about the player doing this. So, let's try this from the other side then. The answer to what is happening now is a lot of neutral jumping, because the opponent understands the scramble very well, and is likely to punish decently and keep coming after they've done the punishes. So you see here a lot of continued attacks in spaces that you'd expect might have stopped otherwise. Jabs into throw, stuff like that. So this is actually a player who I should go in on more, because the way that they play means I'm going to get more options to do that, but I have to open them up enough to do that first, because otherwise they're going to be the one constantly at flow advantage. I also need a lot more meter in this particular match, because I need to be able to use ES legs to deal with their block strings, get out of a lot of stuff. So the overall flow of it is toward, okay, the lag has slowed down. The lag has basically either gone away, or because of the way I shifted to playing, stopped mattering to me. The key to this being, why am I taking so much damage? And the answer to that is because if you don't recognize your opponent's particular way of flowing toward you, you can't decide when to attack or not. So let's continue to observe our Ryu player and see whether or not the Ken is likely to shift it. Because Ken as a character tends to defeat this type of Ryu. Because Ken has an invincible reversal, it's not in a scramble, you don't have to charge it. You can get out of the scramble by immediately doing your ES uppercut. You can technically do it by hitting your heavy uppercut. Meaning that while the skill gap between these two players might be high, we don't know for sure yet, Ken is likely to be able to get more success just by using more meter and understanding when to use that meter. But for Ken, there's not too much to understand. Fight. The other relatively strong way to deal with this player would be to use your empty jump low and expect that they'll whiff their stuff. But Chun-Li is terrible at this, so I'm going to have to come up with something else if I face them again. Purposely whiffing your jump in, however, is a good way to deal with this sort of player if you believe that you can deal with them. You have to very carefully confuse them as to range, which is how I'm supposed to beat Ryu in general. But unfortunately, I don't get to practice that a whole lot.
Is it in that case that you actually particularly do want to whiff it rather than just doing an empty jump?
You specifically want to whiff it at least some of the time, because otherwise the player will read that your defensive mindset has kicked in, that you're trying to bait them, and get to react with things like the sweep that they did.
I see, where otherwise it's masked.
Because you have to make them with the uppercut too, which is hard.
Ah. That is hard. Alright then.
But there are usually good buttons for causing it with your characters, because they are misleading as to how far you jump in from. You can do it by hitting the button early and never intending to strike them at all and see if they flinch. This is usually something easy to do in the first parts of a match. Just jump in and hit a button really early, but you know you're too far to actually get anti-aired. But it'll still solve your problem. The main points are, don't try to actually successfully jump in on this player, and be ready to use your meter to defend yourself when their offense starts.
Alright.
Those are the two key things I would tell you.
I'll give that a shot, since it looks like I will in fact get to face them if they don't wander off.
But there's one, for example. The other thing you have to understand about them that's really hard to get into your practice is that you can, this player particularly, there's a decent chance you can backdash out of most of their jump-ins.
That will require a little effort, yes. I may be
Which is good because backdashing would then put you at the spacing that is optimal for dealing with them in every other way. Our Ken player's problem, if you're watching, I'm happy to help you with it, is that they aren't reading the Ryu's switches to defense. This player is one of the players that's more binary. They're either completely on offense or completely on defense, which means that when you get knockdowns on them, the chances that you will manage anything on wake up are small. Your chances of baiting them, if you don't do it too often, for example, are much better. If you don't go for wake up pressure too often on Scotty Tech, but when you do, you tend to bait them. Or you go in when they don't have meter and make them miserable and then bait them later. Those things can lead to you getting more damage because of the way that their mindset is at the moment.
Alright, well let's see what I can do about that then.
Now, the good thing about Sakura is that Sakura's jump-ins can be very, very misleading to Ryu. Because all you have to do is basically jump with light punch and not really try to hit them at all. The thing I can't tell you is what you should do when they whiff, because it's difficult with Sakura because her medium punch does not reach that far to land and whiff punish. So you have to come up with something from here. You're probably going to have to go for the crouch medium punch on landing, if anything.
Alright. Alright, I'll give that a shot.
So, those are the three components. Backdash when your opponent jumps, jump forward without trying to hit them, and use your meter to wake up when you... Not to wake up, to get out of block strikes.
Okay.
Right, so right now your opponent is pure defense mode. But you can manage to mess them up with the light jump-ins, and so on. And now you're out, so you get away, and the bait, and so on. You can see that it's not specifically too difficult to figure out if you understand your opponent enough.
I see.
That is the main thing that will be a problem to you, and I could have warned you about that from the beginning. I could have told you, do the jab jump in and then block, because the current response your opponent uses is max range sweep. This is not because, oh, they don't know what they're doing. This is because sweep is the thing that will reach in that situation most of the time. So they're having a good response. It's just that I can advise you faster than they can respond at the moment.
Alright. Ah, no. Not quite minus enough.
Only this type of... No, it's that only this type of player will do that. Only this type of player will go in with an unsafe move and invincible out of their own unsafe move. Because their concept of offense is, my meter is to be used for offense, my timing is to be used for offense, my spacing is to be used for offense.
Everything is off.
When I'm on defense, everything is defense. It's actually a really valid style in a lot of games. I'm betting people would argue that it's not really a Ryu style, but so what?
Too close for that jump in.
The key problem you're having here is that you're not walking them down. Because when they're on defense, they don't have enough moves to keep you from getting close to them with Ryu at the moment.
I see.
So when they're walking backward, you have advantage because they're going to stay on defense until something jolts them out of it. But you don't have to jolt them, you could walk them all the way to the corner. Now, in your case, the issue is that you're used to playing footsies on Kareem, but you still haven't gotten into it on Sakura. Which means that when your opponent does let you get close enough to use footsies, you don't immediately switch mentally.
Ouch.
But you're still doing really well relative to what this is. Yeah, that was just you messing up the bait. But that interaction happened because your instinct is to close distance and assume that your opponent is going to flinch and not be ready on their defense, or that they're going to block and let you continue your offense. But this player is not going to allow that to happen. Once they have started to walk back, you can consider them to be like Amara. They're ready for everything. They're looking specifically for you making an attack that they can stop.
Okay.
They're not thinking at any point, okay, I should try a move because she's close enough that one of my moves might hit. They're just waiting for you to do something.
Really brazen about my walkdowns.
Yes, but that's how you have to deal with this sort of player.
Alright. We'll see about convincing myself to be really brazen about my walkdowns. Because you know how, like, you're used to hesitating because most players are not quite that defensive, and you know they're gonna hit me or something. Then you meet the one, you just gotta turn it all off. So alright, we'll see how that goes next time around the wheel.
I expect our Zeku player to actually have some better luck here because it's difficult for Ryu to keep up with this style of Zeku without meter. Zeku's jump-ins are ambiguous and kind of fun in that way, if nothing else. And he has a lot of similar ways through Ryu stuff and ways to bait Ryu stuff that are built into his wake-up treasure. The Zeku player has also quickly seemed to note that the easy way to deal with this player is to assume that once they have hit a button, they're going to keep hitting buttons. They're on offense. And that means that you should be using your EX move to get out of that as quickly as possible. Technically, for example, I would do better in this matchup with Colleen by far. In fact, if this were a tournament and I faced this player, I would have immediately switched to Colleen. Because I can't do this consistently enough with Chun-Li at my current training level, and it's just frustrating to do. But Colleen could parry out of almost all of this. And even if it didn't work well, I could eventually get the player to stop trying and therefore nullify a part of their style simply by playing a character that could parry them, even if I never did it. This is not as true when it's actually like Kareem who has a meter for the parry, because your opponent will then think about how to bait it out, and it's a little bit emotionally draining to do that. When you have a giant tag on you that says, I am ready to parry you now, even this sort of opponent will probably try to bait it.
Round one. Fight!
But between Zeku's really good cross-ups and ability to use his meter when under pressure to get out, he may be able to get something. The problem, if you can see it here, is that our Zeku player is also fairly offense twitchy, which means that they'll miss out on a lot of their opportunities to do bigger damage by hitting buttons too early and therefore ending up doing less damage.
Is that a factor of not taking opportunities to bait things, then? Or are they just causing weird spacings or such?
Our Ryu player is very good at scrambles, first of all. And our Zeku player deals with scrambles by hitting quick buttons, but they're not super quick buttons. If they could manage to calm themselves so that they didn't hit buttons in scrambles at all, and trusted that the Ryu player would, they would end up blocking a ton of this stuff. But here you see it constantly. Something very much like a scramble happens, if not an outright one. And Zeku hits a button. Now, sometimes this works, but for the most part it hasn't gone well. Similar situations like that where, okay, I pushed you out, but I'm not sure I can finish it. Let me hit another button in case you do something. Because Scotty Tech tends to just straight uppercut at that point, the button whiffs on 4-3 side and nothing happens.
Unfortunately, Scotty is out, it seems.
Ah, I see. Oh well.
Wonder if their connection was not quite as good as they had hoped. So now we get some Zeku training.
So, taking that piece of information, that the Zeku player tends to scramble and then hit more buttons at the end of the scramble, I actually already have used this information. Because you would have noticed that I began to use EX legs in basically random situations. But I'm not just randomly hitting EX legs. I understand that I have superior range and extreme speed with the move. And I understand that it whiff punishes a ton of things. Now normally this is no use because the opponent doesn't hit enough randomness in neutral to be punished. But so far it seems as if I have a chance with this particular player. As you can see there, what is happening that is not good is that I spend a lot of time hitting buttons, expecting that they're about to block.
And then they don't.
See? Like that. So I end up needing this meter, which means that I then need to spend more time thinking about how to get in on them. But if I got advantage early enough into it where I had the meter advantage, I could probably win out of it directly. So, to me now, understanding this player's rhythm and the fact that they're unlikely to change it because this type of rhythm is really hard to get out of your system. I can hit Hake at a lot more situations than I normally should be able to. The key then is to understand which of their buttons is minus enough or spaced in a certain way enough that I can just hit Hake in that situation. This is the thing I don't have against Zeku yet though. I learned this against mostly Karine.
I see.
Because it's really useful against her. So, in order to keep this up, I now have to quickly try to learn this particular thing from Zeku. I believe that actually, if you play the Zeku CPU, you can learn this, but I didn't prioritize that particular form of training on Zeku enough yet to have a very clear idea. And it's also entirely possible that the player's rhythm can be different from the CPU's rhythm, and there's no way to improve yourself by just playing the CPU. But I totally admit that at the moment, I'm not thinking about, wait, I know that move. I know how that move works. I should hit Hake here. I'm not being tricked out of stuff by my opponent's unconventional decisions. I'm just not doing the right thing.
You're just not used to their unconventional timings.
Right. There's a bunch of stuff here that they are doing that I'm pretty sure is plus enough that I shouldn't hit Hake. Maybe I can hit crouch light kick.
I guess that their spacing would be a little troublesome for that button, actually.
Like there, I should have hit it. I should have hit it because I should have believed. And of course, there is a point where Zeku's spacing allows the Hake to be hit, even though the, let's say, the button isn't one where I should be able to hit it. That it's
Sure,
plus enough on block that I right.
And presumably Hake does not stick out your hurt box very much.
No, this is why it's mainly useful for this. Now, obviously, if you just use one move, your opponent will absolutely adapt to you over time.
Sure. So you need a backup to condition him, or at least not to condition him quite so badly. So what is the alternative in your case?
At the moment, I don't know. That's the point.
Alright.
I can now say, okay, I'll go practice against this character and learn what other things I can do out of Zeku playing precisely like this. Because it's not actually that strong a style of Zeku to use. It's inventive because you're taking a lot of risks because you can play much more like Scott Peck did and use block strings that you expect to work, and when they don't, just uppercut. And the risk you're taking is that you'll get crush countered and heavily damaged for the uppercut. But that's not totally terrible, and if you don't uppercut often, your opponent's not going to bait you into it or anything. It's just you adapt to it for certain types of player, you adapt to it against grapplers, and so on. But I don't have this because basically it's a weird-ish Zeku style. So I'm now going to retrace my steps through the match, think about where Chun-Li has a range advantage, what I should have probably hit, what I could backdash out of, and whether or not backdashing would even be good, and so on.
Then.
But for Sakura, the answer is simple. She can just also back heavy punch a ton of stuff. And the main thing you care about is whether or not you're at the right range to do that or not. Your heavy kick, however, will generally not work, so I don't suggest trying it, and activating your V trigger as early as possible will help.
Now
But remember that your problem... Yes, you're trying to hit your opponent. You keep on taking actions to reach them, to hit them. It's really not in your favor at this point. So just activate your V-trigger and take your space. Because Zeku is just not, he's like Ryu, he's not that dangerous a character. He can't actually close space so much that you have to worry about him instantly being in your face. He can be walked down in the same way. And the only difference is that you have to learn how to whiff punish different moves.
Alright.
It was in fact good that you went in as you did, except for the fact that you went in off the wrong move. Because young Zeku can't actually do anything there, and you'd have been fine. But here you can already see that as you get the opponent lower and lower, and they start to recognize that they're making those sorts of mistakes, you'll see more and more usage of their meter to get them out of bad situations.
Alright. program is not in fact Tatsuo.
Ah, you didn't go for more V-trigger. This is a good opponent for you to practice Sakura on, because Sakura's relatively high mobility has been tempting you to use that mobility against people who have strong defense.
Yes. Yes, it has.
Round one. Fight.
But you do have to get used to and respect her space control and your ability to use that space control. You do spend a little bit too much time on the offense with Sakura, which means that you have the same problem as our Zeku player. You are often getting clipped or losing opportunities to do damage because you were trying to do damage or close space immediately.
I see. Alright then.
Round two.
So my best suggestion at the moment is to give yourself some time by using your crouch medium kick and crouch heavy punch when you feel as if you don't know what to do. Even if you're just whiffing them in neutral from super far away, those are going to save you more trouble than anything else. Because it has an interesting reverse effect. You quickly realize, I'm getting hit because I'm using this move. This move is a bad idea because my opponent keeps on punishing it. But they'd punish anything else. So at least it's making yourself not hit the button because you know it's bad. Whereas with everything else, you would go, well, maybe it'll work this time.
I see.
This is a good way to improve, but a way to lose a lot. So you have to be very... I've almost forgotten the word now. You have to be very thick-skinned to improve yourself this way.
Just having that default button that you know is a horrible idea, and keeping it as your default button.
Let's do this.
Which I suppose just a little bit is another instance of that sort of gambling effect that we were talking about last week. Or rather, it's the way to avoid it.
So, as for myself, I'm going to set my terrible idea button mentally to heavy punch.
Okay.
And therefore force myself that every time I don't know what to do, just hit heavy punch. I expect that this will lead to terrible destruction. If not, it turns out I learned something. But making myself want to hit the heavy punch and then think, I really shouldn't hit this button, allows me to stay still long enough to see where my opponent left a hole in their offense. And I do this by actually literally constantly thinking about hitting the heavy punch.
And just holding back. As you can see, I'm actually able to spend a lot more time waiting for the opponent to do the wrong thing because I am focusing on doing something terrible and purposely not doing it.
Round two.
Like right there I wanted to hit heavy punch, there I wanted to hit heavy punch.
We're a little behind you, we just got the round start.
Oh, he has a good... Right, his crouching jab is good enough to make that a bad idea. Shouldn't though, should it? Why is that? He has a 3-frame jab, I think. Crouching jab. Yeah, that would probably be why.
And I can check it if you like.
I don't care enough.
Alright then.
It's just a particular bad decision that I keep on forgetting. It works when he's in old form, but not when he's
I
in
see.
young, and I have to remember that.
I see. Alright then.
Practicing doing that sort of thing is also helpful for a different reason. Being able to mentally lock yourself onto something you want to do, even if it's not the real thing in this case, to make yourself focus on something you want to do, and then make yourself not do it. Because this is a way to train bad habits out of yourself, and absolutely vital for very quickly adapting in hard matchups. To turn off your autopilot, to basically go, this is not a good idea. I'm not doing this now.
And then because you have the thing in mind, you have a specific thing to either resist or focus on the right time to do, and it just distracts you from your autopilot, is it? Sort of?
Yeah, basically.
Alright then.
Now, it's very difficult to do that while thinking about your opponent's flow and rhythm and those things, but the useful thing is to realize that the entire reason you should have gotten there is by doing that to begin with. The reason you know that you need to do that is because you have faced this opponent and understand their style enough to make that decision directly.
Sure. So it's not like the thing you're thinking about is a bad idea either, it's just a matter of figuring out when you want to do it.
Why does he have more? No, wait, something's wrong here. Oh no, there's not, it's not.
Huh?
Part of the reason why I do that particular thing, where I hit stand medium punch, and then use Hake right after, is because many characters, if they hit anything at all, will get crush countered by the Hake. But Zeku not only doesn't seem to get crush countered, he doesn't need to do anything. It's not in his mindset to do anything.
I see. So it has no benefit for you, more or less.
Not in this matchup at this time.
Okay.
I have a different option, but again I must make myself do that different option. I should hit stand medium punch into forward medium punch, and that would resolve the situation at least somewhat. Also, I know that that duck combo does not work on him when he does his target combo, and I have to do a bunch of work because of that. So I'm relatively inspired now to deal with Zeku, and I'm going to leave you to fight them for a little bit, I think, if they are willing to stay even if I drop to back. Some people, you know.
Well, I certainly don't
Right
mind,
off.
so let's find out. Oh, we have another teammate popping in as well. And he's not going to stay either way, so it doesn't matter. Alright.
Oh well. So,
Let's do this.
basically I have stuff to run through to go redo for Zeku. It would probably take about an hour. But the main thing that I'm talking about is the attack versus defense, the understanding of the opponent. I don't feel as if I misunderstood that opponent. Which leads to you being able to hold on to your confidence. When you realize, my autopilot made me lose, my character unfamiliarity made me lose, my bad decisions based on a bad habit I have as a generality that I can grind on, made me lose. When you feel as if you understand what has happened, you can go train on it. You can decide specifically, I'm not going to train on that because I don't need to right now. I did fairly well in the matchup, for example.
Indeed. And it really helps to just be able to know exactly why you lost, so you don't have to wobble or worry about it anymore.
Round one. Fight.
Let's do back heavy punch.
The Wolf is a great person to train this sort of thing against because Alex is such a clearly defined character. He's not a tricky guy. Like, he's not linear per se, but you always know what Alex's options are at any given time. Alex also knows his options and is working on the fact that you aren't fast enough or just can't deal with all of them. But you know what they are, he just has a lot.
Sure.
And this makes him a good partner for training this because while Alex is not locked into being offensive or defensive, he has a lot of tells as a character. When Alex is walking forward, because a lot of his offense is immediately disabled, as in he has no charge, he has a tell that he cannot do certain moves, and you're not in danger of particular things. When Alex is walking backward, he'll eventually outspace himself so that he can't do his close-up pressure, and you don't have to worry about that. When he's walking backward, you know he can't do head crush or stomp, and while it's more so of a negative tell, it's still the same thing. You can figure out what Alex is doing. When he's walking backward, he can basically only do slash elbows.
Oh, I thought that
and
was...
flash chop if you really decide to do it. But I'm saying that he walks out of range of everything else.
Got it. Alright, I thought there was another one in between there.
No. So if Alex moves backward, you should treat it as a tell for his ability to do certain things, and if he moves forward, you treat it as a tell for him attempting to do other things. As a result of this, it's also true that if Alex is walking backward, his defense is so strong that chances are you shouldn't hit anything. If Alex is walking backward, you should be walking forward, and that's probably the only thing you should be doing.
Alright then.
Unless you have some way to trick him into getting hurt when he does slash elbow, you probably should just walk forward. It helps if you have a good stand heavy punch to deal with things.
Sakura's stand heavy punch is quite nice.
And there's also some little pieces that come in there. BirdieBot is really good at training this. If you were worried about there being no bot to train this, because Alex's bot was based on something else, don't worry, BirdieBot is completely based on this. This is why he is the bot for putting it all together at the easy level. Understanding this part is what that bot is built for, so... And he's also not that hard to input if you are not familiar with our bots. He's a little bit tricky in like one input, but it doesn't cripple him if you can't do it, so... You can definitely try putting in BirdieBot if you don't understand this form of it, the back and forth, the tells, and so on. Switching your own offense and defense mentality quickly. Train with BirdieBot to develop this skill, but don't overdo it because you'll get locked into birdie stuff. Just like do it to refresh yourself whenever you realize you've done it poorly in a match. Now, Alex's strength in this situation is that slash elbow can be spaced really well, making it basically impossible for you to counter it after he's done it, and it's only -2 now. So good spacing on his slash elbow is a really good option that made Alex a lot stronger. He's still not, by most people's standards, top tier or anything, but he certainly can put more pressure on people now that that move works that way. The interesting thing about Alex is that as a character, his tells disappear once you've cornered him, but because his wake-up pressure is generally bad, you generally have to make a really weird decision. Do you take the potential for wake-up pressure on a character who has no good options, but could still win out if he just made a hard read? Or do you give him the space, because if he's going to come out of the corner himself, he's going to do it in an extremely linear way, and he can't respace his own slash elbow. You can make sure that he ends up where you want him to. Therefore, there are quite a lot of tactics involved there.
I think I'm trying to overuse the tells a little bit mentally, and the result of this is that I'm ending up losing to the minor details, I guess, in a way. If that makes any sense.
That normally happens to players when they're trying to make use of the tells to make their attacks. But Alex is not the sort of character who you can make attacks on him because of his tells. His tells tell you how to prepare your defense and how to go about your movement. But if you're trying to go, okay, I saw him walking backward, I can attack him now. There's no attack that you get to do, per se.
I see. Alright then. I will try adjusting that perspective and see if it helps me directly any, or if I still get myself caught up.
But that brings me to the next point, where the tell is only there to help you against the character. You still have to understand the mindset of the player on top of that. That's why I say the Wolf is in particular a good person to do this, is because he's so good at reading this in other people that he'll tend to do his attacks and defense based on when you are likely to move.
I see. Best button.
For example, after every throw tech so far, you've been the one that got hit. Because he knows you're going to attack, and he knows that Alex has a really long crouch medium that will win.
I see.
Now, this also means that you could probably find something else to do there. I have no suggestions as to what. I'm just saying you could probably find something.
Alright. Well, part of the answer is to probably block for a moment. But I will have to think about the rest of the answer.
For example, in my case, I would hit Chun-Li's crouch heavy punch, because this should happen on the same frame. His medium should lose to my heavy, and victory. Hake might work, I'm not sure. For Sakura, I would actually suggest also hitting her crouch heavy.
Alright.
I don't remember what her sweep is like. But you could always just jump like that. The problem is that the jump doesn't lead to much, so... Now, this doesn't mean you can force Alex to get hurt, because it also means that Alex's best option after scrambles is just to jump back. Sakura can't chase him that well, and he'll build up enough charge by the time he lands that even if you threw a Hadouken and followed it, he would probably be the one with a strong defense that you couldn't deal with.
Right, I would get close, but it wouldn't solve my problems.
But is getting close solving your problem?
Only if I get to overhead him. Or set up Hitoshi things.
But then you're defining your problem as I haven't broken Alex's defense yet, which is a poor way to define an Alex-based problem.
I suppose.
If you're basically perceiving that I'm not hitting him, so I have a problem, Alex is usually going to beat you. Because it means that you will get into a mindset that makes you extremely parryable, and once you become parryable, you become killable.
Oops. Screw that.
So as you can see, if the wolf adapts to basically, oh, when you do weird things and I don't know what to do, I'm just going to jump backward. I'm pretty willing to assure you that you're going to die. But once you get him to the corner, he can't do that anymore. And if he builds up the habit of doing it, then your situation has improved heavily. So manipulating the other player's habits based on their mental state is also a very high-level part of fighting games. Overall, though, his decision should basically be, I am in a scramble, I don't know what exactly will happen, I'm going to jump back. Because Sakura doesn't deal with that well. You're relatively certain to get worn down by Alex doing this over time. And get frustrated about not being able to get to him and open him up. And get yourself killed.
Like I am right now, actually.
Plus, it maintains a spacing where Alex is relatively advantaged against Sakura in the first place. And you can't really do too much else.
So what do I need to do here then? Getting him into a mindset where he's going to give me opportunities is obviously beneficial.
Well, once again, remember that you should always look at what your opponent uses as their main tactic and see what situation on the screen, be it meter difference, be it spacing on the screen, be it how close they are to the corner, something eventually evens it out or makes it a relatively bad idea. Alex can only jump back so much in the end.
Yes. Otherwise he's going to land in the corner.
So the error, if anything, is that when Alex jumps back, you try to catch him. He's already given you the space, you could just dash.
I suppose.
And I don't think you normally would get hit by his stuff if you just dash and immediately stand blocked. But the layer difficulty of this is that you have to recognize this only applies in a situation that is already a scramble. And if your instinct in a scramble is not dash, you have to then rewire it on the fly.
Yes.
While still maintaining everything else in the match. Pros are people who have played the game enough to have the mental capacity to just rewire their own reactions mid-match.
My DP. Well. Yes, I can do that in a very limited space. It's very nice when it works, but it's also very rare. Although in my case, I think it's more so having other reactions that I could just go, oh, okay, you're like this, and preload. I have no idea what it's like for the high-level pros, of course.
Well, let's assume that there isn't that much difference between pros and mid-level players other than practice. That would mean, based on what you just said, yes, that they've practiced so many different things that they can just go, okay, time to drop this and slot this and move this one to the backup or whatever.
Sure. Just connecting up different wires.
Now, the response that the wolf was having to you also relatively works on Akuma with one caveat. Akuma can actually reach you. He can only basically do it with Demon Flip, and it has to be heavy, but he can reach. And Alex might not have a good response to that because Demon Flip is only -2, and the spacing would be very advantageous to Akuma. What Akuma lacks, however, is a good response to Alex's neutral jumping. Whereas Sakura has a bunch of responses to the neutral jump,
I can do anything I
Akuma
want
doesn't.
that. Preferably air throw, of course.
And the better part is, if you realize the Akuma is not responding to your neutral jump, you're probably safe to do a forward jump, which will get you through even more stuff, and with the added frustration of being useful to you in the corner situation where the neutral jump doesn't help. Whereas Sakura, you're basically going to die. On the other hand, I know that Santier has been training very hard on anti-airs. The thing about this is, as you can see, Alex's jump and that light kick when he jumps is so good at jump-ins. It's not a jumping crush because it doesn't lead to any combos or anything, but he might even get like EX command grab off that, for example. So our Alex player gets to learn, I can jump in light kick at a range where it doesn't look like Akuma should be able to respond. In fact, he might not even be able to do certain things at certain timings. And the light kick will clip him. And all of these things tying together mean that Akuma now has to work very hard when at that spacing, when at that scramble spacing, to figure out which jump Alex used, figure out the range that Alex was at when he jumped, decide whether or not he should anti-air at all, decide if he needs to use a different anti-air than usual, parry, whatever. There's all these little things that come in because of the difference in the character. But as you can see from the wolf's spacing on Alex's /elbow, getting it correctly spaced will even keep you out of Akuma's crouch heavy punch, so you're really not in that much danger. And as you can see once again, Alex actually has options for completely changing his jump art if he realized that your response to this was to jump back. Not to mention the massive number of things he can do with just head crush and stomp if you don't respond at all. It allows him to be fairly dominant, not in this matchup, but in this particular subset of interactions in this matchup. Alex wins scrambles against Akuma. In short, Akuma wins this match by pressuring Alex and Alex's poor wake-up, taking him out of the running overall. But if the Alex player is really patient and knows how to block his way out of Akuma stuff, it's really difficult to truly finish him off, because once Alex's V-trigger is active, it's just like Ryu, you can't actually do block string pressure on him anymore.
Right, you're just gonna get parried right at the end of it.
It's go time.
So from both sides, we have something that we can work on. In your case, you should try to make sure that you don't push on Alex unnecessarily with the mindset of, I need to do damage. You should basically consider as Alex is invulnerable until you reach the corner. But in order to stay invulnerable, he has to slide toward the corner. There's a timeout on how long Alex's invincibility lasts.
Sure.
The wolf,
All
on
right
the other
then.
hand, is trying to extend his invincibility as long as possible by finding the right moments to do slash elbow because you didn't space yourself correctly, and he's safe to do it,
I see.
which will let him get back to the middle, which will extend his invincibility more, and possibly get you tricked.
All right then.
And you can't throw him after slash elbow because that's the scramble that you were talking about, because he'll just tech it.
I see.
Similarly, if you have to choose in this matchup between a combo that does more damage and a combo that has more corner carry, you pick the corner carry option.
Hehehe. Best. Dang it. As I was saying. Best button ever. So right now he's still using the Akuma forward jump a little bit, and that's obviously letting me get him nice and hard.
And as you can see, similarly, the reason I mentioned the heavy punch is because most characters stand heavy punches have incredibly good pushback. This pushback means that Alex doesn't get to do anything in the scramble. He can't hit a button afterwards that generally will actually reach you, so you get away with it. It's a scramble where you have now got the benefit. In fact, part of Akuma's weakness in the matchup is that Akuma's stand heavy punch doesn't do this. Akuma's stand heavy punch is functionally unsafe and can't be hit for that purpose because he's not really a spacing footsies character.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of person who can use that button in that way has practiced for probably months on just understanding the range at which they can hit that button against each player. This is probably where Tokido is now. And in the end, it didn't even end up helping him because that's what he was trying to do in the matchup against Daigo. And you know, it turned out Daigo had worked out a way around that.
Oops.
So you can see once you've got Alex back in the corner and you're thinking about how to get yourself out of the situation, Alex is in a way worse situation. And he has to use meter to keep up his spatial invincibility for as long as possible, in the hopes that he'll eventually make you make a mistake and die. But the life lead difference is too high now. He can't afford to use all that meter to keep his position and still make the comeback. It would have been the better decision, given that he had all that space behind him, to give you some of it in hopes that you made a mistake. If you want to understand what problem you have right now, is simply that you are not hitting the stand heavy punch enough in situations where your block string has ended.
I see.
Remember that Karin's overhead is auto-spaced. Sakura's is not. Sakura's is a neutral tool. Karin's is a block string ender.
Aha. Alright, yes, I was trying to take it up as the block string ender and that was not helping me. Bye. What? Fine. got greedy about the wanting the air throw on the neutral jump, and I wasn't quite spaced for it.
The other thing you're not noting is that Alice's crouch medium kick is like -4.
Oh.
I wouldn't necessarily say you should dash after it or anything, but you have a lot of options. At least a little bit of walk forward and stuff like that. Normally the reason we don't use this is because we expect the player to go into head crush or something afterwards. But once you've gotten the match to this point, that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Similarly, yes, you have that option for when you don't feel like putting up with it. Your V-trigger attack does a decent job of compensating for when you're not quite in space to use the equivalent of your heavy punch. Plus that attack whiff punishes a ton of stuff, you should be aware.
Noted. Alas, the EXTP was EX-Hadoken. Yes.
So in order to generally improve your Sakura play, you have to spend more time thinking about how to make your opponent stand in the position you want than in how to open them up or put them there with your block strings.
I see. This is such a nice button.
And there we have the Lariat, which now becomes a good option for the Wolf's position, but can't last as one, unfortunately for him. Still, it is a good backup to have instead of the crouch medium kick. It will punish a lot of the things you would choose to do in that situation, and leads to some decent stuff if he happens to make the read and land it. So it's a good backup for him to have when you are messing around in scrambles and he doesn't feel that the medium kick is a good idea. It doesn't really matter about whether or not the Lariat is specifically a better idea. Whatever made the medium kick a bad idea means that Lariat is probably decent, at least.
Oh, just input error on the walk of all things. But I don't think the forward jump would necessarily have helped a whole lot either.
No, you shouldn't forward jump there. You can walk forward and do light shoryuken, I think.
Alright.
Remember, that is the most incredible shoryuken of all time.
Is it? I certainly
care
know
what
it is
anyone
for
else
any
says.
aerial.
Sakura is the true master of the shoryuken.
Unless she does that. Oops.
This is very similar to Kata 31 and 32 training for yourself, because recognizing that he did the jump back and responding to that by dashing is basically the same thing.
You win.
So now we have two
Oh.
Akumas. We have one gold Akuma that has joined us. They seem to be willing to stick around long enough to get their turn, I guess. So we'll see maybe some difference here. And as I understand Suntier's style, I might be able to pick up things for later training from our gold Akuma if they do in fact use a similar style at all.
Indeed, my immediate thought was, I hope he shows Suntier something useful.
Now, this matchup is oddly good for Sakura until you get knocked down. Similar to how it's good for Chun-Li until you get knocked down.
I see. Alright.
Obviously, it's just saying don't get knocked down is not going to save anyone. But the thing to understand is, Akuma will win the fireball war always, and you probably shouldn't throw them.
Okay. Ah, I got
Akuma
knocked
can
down. It was so
anti-air you.
bad.
Akuma can always anti-air you, so you shouldn't jump.
Okay.
Now this doesn't make you feel as if you have a lot of options, I'm sure, but the good part of this is Akuma is like Ken, terrible at dealing with with Sakura's overhead, and terrible at dealing with Sakura's cross-ups. And I'm sure you remember how this was dealt with in your last Ken match. The reason this happens is because unless Akuma is willing to walk forward and make himself open to her crouch medium kick, he can't maintain a good spacing for himself.
I see.
So Sakura wins by consistently ending up in the right spot through various means, and then just winning from there. And over time, you just have to build up your understanding of whether or not you should overhead or hit crouch medium kick.
Oops.
Once you have V-trigger, you have a third option at approximately the same space, which is even more frustrating to Akuma as a generality. Because now he can't win out by throwing any form of fireball as a main tactic. He has to then activate his own V-trigger, he becomes super easy to anti-air. All these things. But Sakura can't really deal with him once she gets knocked down, because then he has control of how far apart they are with whatever block string he chooses, and she really just can't deal with that. So the key to your play is figuring out where do I want to stand and which button I can use gives him more trouble when I'm at that spot.
I was just considering I
that's
need to
not-
figure out what range to use the overhead part at.
Well, remember that, like, against Ken, your overhead is super long, and that's usually where you want to use it because Akuma can't hit any buttons. What would he do? His jump
I'm
isn't even
probably a
fast
little
enough
too
that he could
accustomed
jump
to-
on reaction.
Karin's overhead range, which is probably not quite so cool.
No, it's not quite as good. But realizing that you lost because, okay, I got over aggressive, I didn't respace myself, I just tried to move and work with whatever space I had, is enlightening. You can go, I can see now that my mistake was in my greed, in my impatience, in any number of things related to the reason you made that decision rather than trying to get your range back. For example, here you are trying to wake up against Akuma.
It worked spectacularly well, as you see.
Sakura's goal in that situation is to get out as early as possible. V reversal helps.
I
Obviously,
forgot about
EX
that one.
uppercut helps. But
Yeah.
more so V reversal in most situations.
I've forgotten about the reversal. I don't think I had meter for the EX. Oh, slight lag. Not horrible yet, but hopefully it won't get worse.
No, looks like our other Akuma is not staying. Just block. What was that words too?
It's supposed to be EXDP, but yes, this also works. But yes. Why am I so shy of blocking? I totally expect to get thrown or something, I guess. I got my block beaten the one time I managed to actually do it in the other match. That's all I know.
Your other problem is that you go for wake up pressure, but as I mentioned before, sometimes when you're under a lot of stress and you finally got your opponent down, you end up going for the wake up pressure simply because it's the only time you've seen yourself with the option. But your opponent knows this just as well as you and will use their uppercut. Therefore, you have to develop over time a concept of I should respace myself so that I am winning based on spacing instead of winning based on hitting buttons on their wake up. Because I need that
Yes, that's the one that's
keep
going to
them honest.
last, too. Getting buttons on the wake up is going to maybe work once or twice, but getting your spacing back gives you a lot more power.
For anyone who's not familiar, the reason why that's so effective is because your opponent generally, if your spacing is really good and you have a good foot seize character, your opponent can't wake up with any button that will actually hit you. Meaning that they get whiff punished a lot or get into some other terrible situation for just even waking up with buttons. Or they wake up with terrible options for buttons and get into that habit and then you get to beat them up.
So persistent with the wake up DPs, although I guess it's been working.
Round 2. Fight.
I like Toshi, it's not quite the right matchup to use it heavily in.
You win.
In any case, we're both going to drift now to put Santir back against the wolf for a little bit.
Sounds fine with me, yes.
Or apparently not.
It's go time.
Oh! My. Well, we can fight for the opportunity to fight the new guy.
I'm trying so hard to remember what that flag is. So now we're back to, once again, thinking through this matchup through the correct lens of Alex being more or less impossible to hurt until he reaches the corner, except through Sakura making some very quick decisions. This is what happens when I say at high levels. Whenever you hear me say on any of our streams for any game, at high levels this is no longer true, I'm referring to the fact that there is a response, but you'd have to train really hard to do it. For example, in this scramble situation, Sakura's response is to dash forward, and then based on what Alex does in the air, respond. But Sakura can only dash forward if Alex jumps back. So you have to first recognize that Alex did a jump back, quickly dash as a result of that jump back, get your attention back onto Alex if you ever left him, recognize which button he hit, and then choose one of 3 things that Sakura needs to hit in time to punish those things.
That's some heavy duty count to 30 feet work.
Your other option is to just let him get away. There's no real reason to not do it. But I'm saying that for Alex, jumping back is a good idea until Sakura is higher level. When a higher level Sakura appears, jumping back loses some of its potency. On the other hand, it might keep on working simply because most people don't train against Alex as hard as other characters. Sakura also has the joy of being one of those characters who is fortunate enough to have a jump medium kick that bypasses a ton of Alex stuff.
Like that.
You win.
But again, it comes down to, is this a good idea? At high levels? No, because the Alex player can, in fact, mentally buffer between keeping their charge and doing their air knee smash. In fact, there's a physical way to buffer that to at least a relatively decent extent. It's just probably weeks of training to do it, if not months. It's a very physically intensive, I can't call it an option stat because it's not really one, but it's a very physically intensive thing to achieve. Our guest requests first to 1, apparently. Well, we are close to the end of the stream, no harm in that.
Alright, I'll set it up. As soon as we get out of this one.
Round 2. Fight.
I'll let them know. Similarly, you can consider your heavy punch in a lot of this matchup to be the equivalent of starting kata 32. You should assume your opponent is going to hit something, and you should assume that you're going to be able to whiff punish that something.
Using it in place of the dash, or using it in place of the medium punch then?
In place of the dash.
Okay. When it whiffs,
If
or
you're
even when
properly
it's
spaced.
blocked?
Doesn't matter. You might get hurt if it's whiffed, and you really wouldn't. There's no whiff punishing if you whiffed the heavy punch. Either your opponent whiff punished you, or they didn't.
Okay.
But if you hit your heavy punch at the correct space, you should assume, if you are both playing fine, then it works like kata 32 and 31. Your opponent can do nothing, they can do something, they can get whiff punished for doing the something, they can get beat up.
Okay.
Getting into the right space to do it is a different matter, but it's still there.
That's
In fact,
not
as
so
you've
much
just
problem
seen,
because it's
if you're a little
affects
too
the
close, you just hit heavy punch again. And Sakura's heavy punch solves a lot of problems.
It's such a wonderful button.
Round 2. Fight.
Now, on the wolf side, there is actually a really easy solution to that as well. Because Alex has 3 moves that deal with that situation. It's just none of them lead into anything good. He can hit light kick, standing, unfortunately giving up a lot of his other options just to get very little damage. He can hit his stand medium punch, but he can only do that after certain ones, and you'd have to recognize them every time. Which is confusing because his crouch medium punch doesn't work for that, but his stand one does. And he has to be spaced correctly, or Sakura can hit buttons and beat it. No, she can't whiff punish the medium punch necessarily, but she can know that the medium punch will be hit and hit her own crouch heavy, same way Chun-Li can, which can lead to problems. But Alex's probably best option in that situation is to just walk back a moment and then lariat.
Alright then. Reconfiguring the lounge as quickly as I can manage. First to 1, he said. Done.
Let's do this.
So, this is generally where your adaptation skill comes in. At Combo Breaker, if you were entered a tournament, or even just like were being rushed off the set at casuals and for some reason it was winner stays on at the casual station. It's not always winner stays on at the casual stations, mostly people come in and go 2 at a time and stuff.
Sure.
You know, so you can play your friends. But if it happens to be winner stays on at the casual station and you want to stay on, obviously you have to figure out how to win.
Indeed.
While you can use your backup information as much as you understand about your opponent's character, sometimes you have to switch purely because you realize my autopilot won't let me win this. My opponent's style with their character beats my current style with this character. I can't adapt in time, but if I change character, I might be able to do it. That's what those are. Sometimes it's matchup, but as games get more and more closer to full balance, that disappears. So this Ryu is similar to our Ryu from before.
Yeah, so I was just noting that.
It's just that their spacing is slightly worse. But the problem is that if you still, unless you walk this player down, the same thing is going to happen. You can't jump at them the same way. And you can't outspace them as easily because they'll wake up with stuff. They're slightly more conservative about what they wake up with. But you can absolutely walk them down the same way you walk down the other one. It's whenever you take another option, like this, that your situation gets worse.
Yeah, that was just after a Minch. I wanted to CA through his fireball, but I didn't manage to get it off.
So, in short, if you felt safe walking with a character, if you felt more safe walking with Karin than you do with Sakura, and you really needed to win, the consideration would be maybe I should switch to Sakura, switch to Karin so that I can walk.
Yes.
But as it stands now, because you aren't comfortable enough walking with Sakura, this is going to be a difficult match for you.
Ah, I didn't mean to press that. Oh well.
And that twitch is going to happen to you until you train your confidence in Sakura enough to do it.
Yeah. Alright then. Well, it's first to one now, so I'll get another chance sooner than later. Although I suppose if I were first to do, I would get my second chance right now. But let's see how Suntear take a shot.
The thing about this is that it normally doesn't help, because most of us who have not gotten to the pro level cannot just switch our autopilot fast enough, because we haven't gotten enough practice as to, okay, I have other options, let me shuffle my deck. It's not likely to happen. So if you find yourself in that situation, you shouldn't really expect to start winning. You could do it in a tournament because it can't get worse. So you might as well. But if you just want to learn, then you're probably better off the other way. The good thing here is that Suntear can definitely walk people down. He also has good timing for when Demon Flip should be used at max range, and just enough understanding of when Tatsu can be used to trick up most people. But I'm not really sure how the Tatsu is going to help here, because this particular opponent might just block them all. What I expect is that well-spaced Demon Flip is going to drive him crazy, and the rest will just be that. So it's basically coming down to, does this player have enough actual offensive ability to break his offense and still do this? That Demon Flip was sadly spaced a little bit off, but could still almost have made it, I think. A good bit of punish on the crouch heavy punch. So there's nothing particular to improve here other than stuff that would be improved by practicing. He knows that the opponent can be walked down, he knows that they can be defended against, and he knows that if he spaces Demon Flip perfectly, the opponent can't do that much. The rest is just understanding whether or not your spacing is good enough to set up the situation you want. There's the scramble, as mentioned before, and the follow-up dash-in that comes with it. It's gonna hit. Didn't matter. This is again a player against whom I would just play Colleen. Not only because Colleen has parries to deal with it, she also has a lot more ambiguous ways of making Ryu flinch than Chun-Li does. So I'm not fighting at this point. It's not going to benefit either me or the Ryu to play because one, I'm not changing to Colleen now, and two, it just doesn't matter. The Wolf is likely to have more trouble with this matchup because Ryu can zone Alex for a relatively longer time, and Alex's main ways of dealing with this are tricky and can lead to him getting jumped on. But this is going to come down more so to what spacing the Ryu player holds and whether or not the wolf can flash chop any Hadoukens that come. If the Ryu player doesn't hold a certain space, Alex does get to walk forward and abuse flash chop to keep himself in the game, while still being ready to air knee smash and similar, or to just stop moving forward and try to set up something. The key, therefore, is how often is our Ryu player actually going to throw fireballs?
Fight.
Because if he doesn't throw them, then Alex gets to just walk forward. And if he does throw them, Alex can flash chop when Alex is far enough away. So Alex needs to encourage Ryu to walk too far out, and then flash chop a bunch of stuff. The good thing is that Ryu's spacing allows Alex to flash chop as a general thing and not care. Therefore easily leading to the feeling that, hey, I'm just doing flash chop because that's what I do. I'm not really just trying to counter all your Hadoukens. I just flash chop a lot. And understanding that means that Alex has a lot of advantage if Ryu doesn't space himself correctly. Because you can chip away at him and have complete control of this match. What's he going to do? Eventually jump? If you're ready with the anti-air, that doesn't matter either. Alex's range makes this a relatively easy thing for him to do. A Ryu player therefore should try to win this by taking up a different spacing or using their axe kick to evade certain things. But until they do, it'll be relatively difficult to keep the wolf from dominating the match, because it's so easy to respace Alex correctly, whereas it's difficult for Ryu to get the spacing right. But there's the axe kick, so now we have to worry about it. Because the axe kick allows Ryu to stay in a range where he's more likely to be able to jump on Alex safely without Alex being able to respond in time. The flash shot doesn't cease to be a good idea. This particular thing just makes it so that the wolf has to be more on point with his anti-airs than he generally is. You can see how, for example, a high-level Alex who constantly is ready with the anti-air would have already won this particular match, because air knee smash has a really good jump anti-air hitbox now. I mean, really good. So you just get destroyed with the current play and would have to then adapt again.
Dead.
But it lets you know, it lets you go basically, okay, my problem in this matchup is not that I'm a bad Street Fighter player in the straight sense. It's I have not practiced enough to do this anti-air. It's not even like, oh, let me react randomly. You're setting up the situation in which you need the anti-air. You know when they will jump, but you're just not anti-airing.
Yeah. I've been there too. I'm
In
sure
this case, the wolf has chosen to have this happen the other way and actually jump for the anti-air, and basically could have finished that off with super for the perfect. Understanding where you are going with your plan is way more important than whether or not you can execute your plan, because execution you can train. Understanding and experience are harder to train, because those are the things that tend to require someone else to play against, and varied and new situations, or just
Yes.
opponents who are growing into their game.
Oh, another Chun-Li. And a gold one at that.
Let's do this.
We'll have to see if they stay around.
Hopefully they have the opposite style to me and you can pick up more stuff. Hopefully they have the opposite style to me and I can pick up more stuff.
Round one.
I generally have a problem because the higher level Chun-Li in the world only like 2 of them play like me in the first place, and I'm not even sure they're still playing. Fortunately, they do pretty well, so I'm not too worried about needing to change style, but it does mean that I can't watch their stuff for matchup knowledge, because there's not enough matchup knowledge to watch. You're going to have the same problem with your Sakura development, where the people who are really good at her, you're going to have to hope that at least one of them has enough setups and style that are similar to yours for you to pick it up, or you're going to have to do it all yourself.
Sounds like a lot of work. On the other hand,
Probably.
plenty of best thing in Sakura, so might have to do it.
Looks like you could use more training. Round 2. Fight.
That is not the space for that. I need to reposition. But how do I reposition? That is not the time for that. That needed to be later. My, not doing well right now.
But the fact that you can identify it, that you can look at each interaction and go, okay, that was supposed to go differently in this way.
Yes.
That was supposed to go differently in this way. It can be frustrating to some people because they feel, it's easy to feel like you should be better. Like your opponent shouldn't be winning. But at the end of the day, you still have to train all your tactics and execution on that sense, which is why we make bots. Bots are there so you can do this.
Yes.
All you have to do is understand whatever it is that you need to train
And figure
so
out how to
that
set
it
it up.
doesn't come up.
And at the same time, when you consider the alternative of, I keep screwing up, I don't even know what's going wrong, it's way, way calmer and lets you honestly just train a lot more easily, waste a lot less time, a lot less energy emotionally. To be able to just say, dang it, I screwed this up. Dang it, I screwed that up. And know exactly how and why. Not the least of which because it means that rather than going, I have to train the Alex matchup, what do I even do? And like going and fighting Alex CPU for ages or anything like that. I can just be like, okay, I need to fix this, and I need to fix this. And then you can even target those scenarios.
Without this understanding, it's difficult to make the most out of our bots, which is why this page with them doesn't detail them based on just their name. You're not really supposed to go, okay, I lost to Zangief, I should fight Zangief bot. Because the reason you lost to Zangief might not be remotely related to what Zangief bot is for, or even what the Zangief CPU could do. It could be an entirely different thing because, as mentioned before, there are different styles of play at various levels. As you get higher, the optimal style of play changes, and therefore people who play suboptimal styles of character A tend to switch to character B simply so that they're not doing that. But if you are relatively casual or just feel confident that you could develop your skills with a certain character enough even though the style you play is not the optimal style, you do have to understand what to train on and why you might have lost, and it might not be related at all to which character you were fighting.
Round 2. Fight.
I was so sure I was gonna stun. Going in for the pressure at the end there that got him uppercut, for example, was technically a good idea. The reason is, even taking that uppercut is unlikely to lead to the loss of the match. In a long set, that would have been an incredibly good bait by going for it, seeing if your opponent does the wake-up uppercut or if they're expecting to be baited. If they do the wake-up uppercut, you still have a ton of health, you still have all the space behind you. Your opponent can no longer super, and he doesn't necessarily have good wake-up. So what did you lose? if you're dealing with an opponent who is extremely good at making comebacks and doesn't crack easily, or who you only manage to get to the corner through luck, basically, maybe you shouldn't go in. Maybe you should try to win out in neutral when their life is really low. But making those decisions is based on your understanding of the attack and defense style and note of the character.
It also is very useful for that sort of thing to be able to have a basic understanding of yourself and your opponent so that you can decide basically what you can pull off.
Round one.
Like I miss this color.
Fundamental level.
But alas, police work is police work. Now the wolf actually knows how to deal with this style of Chun-Li as well, because I tried it for a while. It doesn't work on Alex that well. The reason it doesn't is not because you can't keep him out, but because of the same problem as the Ryu. You can flash chop through too much of this, and Chun-Li doesn't have a whole lot of good responses to Alex flash chopping through it all. So you don't get full screen stuff, basically. Fortunately for this, the wolf didn't start the match like that, first of all, and this player's defensive flow means that they get anti-airs more easily than most players would. The wolf can, however, beat them almost completely off command throws. I am convinced that he could command throw them to death because the way that they make their approaches is a little weaker. Their defensive play is so good that their offensive play has probably suffered at least somewhat. Unfortunately, the Wolf's command throws are still not the best executionally, and therefore he's going to have trouble in this matchup regardless. But it's again a matter of being able to say, I could practice how to keep up with you, I could practice how to beat you. I don't have to lose. But maybe it's a month of practice just to get to the point where they could get caught in enough command throws.
That sort of thing does wonders for being able to let go at the end of a match when you're losing, maybe if you're even losing a longer set. Because, you know, I could fix this, and I can choose not to fix this right now. And therefore also choose not to worry about it.
Now as for you, the setup is much simpler.
Alright.
You already understand that the opponent can play defensively, you already understand that they can anti-air well.
Sure.
The thing that differs between them and me is that they don't stick out a lot of buttons in neutral yet. We haven't seen indications that they stick out buttons in neutral to keep you out.
Okay.
This could be because the wolf wasn't approaching all that quickly, but I doubt that's the reason. If they don't stick out a lot of buttons in neutral, it means that you met like the one character that Sakura can zone.
I see. Alright then. Put my fireballs to good use.
But of course, it's not as simple as just throwing fireballs. It must be throwing fireballs with the expectation that you might be able to Tatsu. So the range you're trying to reach in this matchup is relatively complicated, and you might still lose just by trying to do it, but practice-wise, you absolutely should do that. You should throw your fireball, and when you think you could get your Tatsu, go for that. And besides that, probably grab them out of the air a lot.
Sounds good to me. That's my favorite thing.
Now, note as I was saying before for the wolf, this player's way of approaching is mostly about throwing a fireball or something and then dashing. They're not super strong on offense. The question is, how do you deal with the dash? I don't know. There's a reason I don't play this style. I just don't like the difficulty of playing this style with my mental state is way too high for me. Because it requires that you be able to trick your opponent into attacking you, which for some reason people just don't like doing to me. I tried this style for a long time, but I found that people would stay away too much, and I would become ineffective as a result. for example, you could backdash out of most of this and just probably frustrate them.
Alright.
It's by trying to stand your ground or by getting cornered that you're going to lose.
I see. Alright then. I will add that.
Final round.
Now, this is specifically at the point where you find yourself too close to do any of your other stuff. You don't have to change anything else. It's entirely, oh, I'm too close, I'm getting hit by crouch medium kick and stuff, I can't get myself out of this. Just backdash. It's not actually dangerous to do. Right here, backdash. That's it.
I see.
Now again, as you remember, I used to play this style, and obviously the jumps that come out of it are a result of being flustered at not being able to do certain things, and then jumping. They're relatively hard to anti-air. It wasn't like, oh, I can't do anything, I can't get these jumps.
Sure.
But they got defended too easily, and it often messed up my spacing. And
Just
then
by
whenever I
blocking?
met anyone who... Yeah.
Alright.
And then whenever someone started to actually anti-air them, I just died.
Okay.
This style is one that you can only use if you have two things that I haven't seen the player use yet. One is a huge amount of daring relative to their EX legs, and two is perfect or near perfect spacing on their forward medium punch. There were also changes made to Chun-Li that made this style weaker while giving her more options so that I didn't have to use it. And at that point
see.
it was just, okay, fine, I'm gone, I'm not using this anymore. Now, for Santier, this style is a little troublesome, but only a little bit. The reason it would be difficult to keep up is more so because Chun-Li can trick you into anti-airing the same way that the previous situation came up with Alex and the jumping light kick, which means that Akuma has to be ready to anti-air in ways that are not as practiced on Santier's side. Overall though, it's not too hard. The key would be making sure that he's always ready with a certain type of punish, and expect them to jump. Expect them to jump just as much, if not more, than I used to. It's just not going to be that easy to... Because you can't walk forward with Chun-Li and keep charge. She's the same as Alex. She can do certain things with good buttons, but it's not really going to help you that much. That's the reason you need that daring EX legs. Because sometimes you need to go forward immediately because you think your opponent's about to move, and she just doesn't have a way to move forward immediately and clip you in certain situations other than that. So you have to be really ready to just go straight in with the EX legs and make your opponent miserable with it. But Santier's fought me enough to know how to do most of this, and it's just going to come down to how good this player is at baiting an anti-air that won't actually work.
Okay.
The Wolf, on the other hand, is likely to have a lot more problems with this, because not only must he anti-air with Alex's more complex anti-airs, he also can't maintain range advantage against Chun-Li. It's relatively important that he use a lot of V-skill in this matchup, along with that flash shot. He has to slowly tick forward on that V-meter to make sure that he has enough to handle her when the offense does start. And once he does this, the player is very likely to change the way that they're approaching to try to clip him while he's using Alex's V-skill. And Alex has no strong defense against that. You have to remember, it's very important to remember that Alex can build charge while doing his V-skill. He does not have to stand. You can press the V-skill button while holding down back, and you will get your stuff. So it's mostly take some distance, get ready to flash chop. If you don't see a Kikoken or you think it's not going to reach you, power up. Because every time you have that tiny chance of getting your hard hit, you have drastically increased your chances of winning this match with this style of Chun-Li.
Fight.
As you can see, this mostly comes down to, can I anti-air in time? Because if he can, then things get good. And if he can't, then it just gets confusing. Because he can't move as freely. So I expect him to have a lot more trouble with this match, because his concept of when to anti-air is very preemptive. He doesn't respond as quickly as most players, making it difficult to push out on this. And without the command grab to grab them when they try to start approaching, it's going to be hard. Now, I could probably try to help him by going back to my old style to do it, but I'm not expecting it to help too much. That was the other reason I left this style, because grapplers make Chun-Li really miserable when she does this, because all of her moves are super punishable, and if you really want to punish them with command grab, then that's going to happen.
I see. Sounds painful. Just gotta block.
Here, for example, it would just be dead.
Chun-Li wins.
Plus, the way Chun-Li's kick works, you really can just relax. You can stop blocking as soon as ES legs starts being blocked, which means you can completely calm yourself down in time to do the command grab properly.
Sure. And that's it for our Chun-Li. And since it's been
probably at far stream.
usual 2 hours, yes indeed. So we'll stop there for now, and hope you all have a good evening. If you're interested in the bots we were discussing, you can find them at our website, 2-mk.org/bots. And if you want to contact us for any reason, there's a page on that site as well. So you can stop by for our Tuesday Train Guilty Gear lobbies tomorrow, or something else Street Fightery on Wednesday, Dragon Ball on Thursday, and possibly bot content, possibly something else on Friday. So with that, have a good evening everyone, and see you possibly tomorrow.